Steve from View Yonder. Wanted to do a little video read through of this new report on the Candid candidate. If you watched this before, we've got part one was about the four horses of the hiring apocalypse, which was a kind of tongue-in-cheek, as we always like to be tongue-in-cheek, story about hiring from the hiring side. This is hiring from the candidate side. And the next piece of this will be about a solution, but we'll get to that in due course. So I'm just going to do a quick read through this because some people like to watch videos or listen to them while they're making beef stew for their family, as I was told this week. So let's get into this. So in this report, the Candid candidate, what we've done is we've tapped into the collective knowledge, experience of people and their experience of being a job candidate. The goal of all of this is to work out, can we make this better? I speak to people on a weekly basis, if not daily, from all different sides of the recruitment angle. And there's definitely some things we can fix. There's always going to be bad people and crap people, but there's definitely a path to making this a little happier. So what can we do in this report? Well, I kind of jokingly, as I said, tongue-in-cheek, it's part therapy just to share what other people have seen as a candidate, which will make a lot of sense to you if you've been through this. And if you're reading this, I'm pretty sure you have been. It's going to be a little bit of tough love about what we can do, right? A little bit of honesty about that. And then I've got an ask for you about what we can do together after this. Because let's be honest, bitching and moaning, we can all do that, right? Nothing changes. So this is a kind of attempt to move beyond that. You can contact me via any of the socials. Love to hear from you and your point of view. I've had some great feedback from candidates. I appreciate everybody that's done that in confidence. Um, couldn't do this without you. So thank you. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to go through a list of observations, the candid candidate observations, and then we're going to talk about handling it. So if you look in the TOC, we've got 15 observations here, which to be honest is more than I thought. I thought we'd get maybe 10 at a push. And some of these are kind of linked, but it's still 15. So let's go through pretty quickly. First one is ghosting. Gotta be far and above the biggest complaint by everybody. I don't think there's one person didn't complain about this. So this is where all of a sudden the recruiter or hiring manager just stops communicating with you. Now the interesting thing is this can happen at the start of a process where they just don't respond. That doesn't seem so bad, right? There's there's not been any investment really in the process so far. So it would still have been nice to hear to no. Even better, why not? That would be cool. That's a whole other topic. But the further down the process you get, you would think it'd be even harder to ghost people. But it seems for some folks, they don't mind ghosting you no matter how far down the application you are. Now, I've spoken to some recruiters and hiring managers about this, and I said, why do people get ghosted? And they said, we've just got too much on, Steve. And I was like, well, okay. But just saying, hey, it's the end of the road in your process because of X reason, surely that's a pretty easy thing to do, right? Now, one thing in response to that was, well, we might want to put that candidate forward for another job. And my response to that was, well, if you ghost them, they will not want to work with you again. So there's some confusion out there. I can see both sides, but at the end of the day, if you ghost anybody for any reason, it's not just in work, right? It's not a good thing. Just be honest, tell them why, and move on. Right, totally fine. Because what happens is candidates talk to each other, right? And they certainly talk to people like me who talks to lots of other people. Now, we don't gossip about everybody, but when someone phones me up and says like, "Hey, Steve, I'm thinking about company X because Y is hiring," if I don't give a great, if I know nothing, I'll just say it. Don't really know them, couldn't give you an opinion. But if I say to them, well, I know someone who went there, wasn't a good experience by them, what I might do is I might connect you to the person who had the bad experience and let them explain. We'll talk about allies next. Now we can fix it. Now, the brother to ghosting is gaslighting. And he's basically lying, right? That's what this is. It's when, there's different types of it, but some of the candidates were pretty brutal. And they said, they gaslight you because they don't have a fucking clue, right? And the interesting thing about that is they find it's because the person that really understands the job is already overloaded. And so there's a bunch of gatekeepers and filters at the front, and they're the ones that don't have the clue, right? Great recruiters and hiring managers really get the job. And I don't just mean know the job spec, I mean know the company, know the team, know what they're looking for, know what they're not looking for. But if it takes you several gates to get to that person, you're going to find the truth is different from what you were told before, which is a bit of a pain. And the other one of that is where they say, well, what money do you want? You say, well, what package is there? This to and froing is a little bit strange that it's still going on today. A company knows how much they've got in the budget, and they think, oh, well, candidates are just going to go for the top end. But at the end of the day, gaslighting is about truth. And again, it's bad for humans to go through it. The other thing, and I think this is truth again, is the whole job phishing thing. And there's a couple of different angles I wanted to break out in this. There's the keyword stuffing, or as I call it, the Frankenjob. So if you talk to someone like James Foster, who's, someone I did a live stream recently about CVs, he talks, powerfully about making your achievements impactful and relevant to this job that you're doing. Now, if this job is fake, it's a waste of time. And there's nothing worse than wasting your time. Another angle in this is where people feel like the keyword stuffing is just a ruse to get your CV in, and then they're just going to filter you out on the application tracking system. But as James said on the live stream, that's not quite what ATS does. But let's look at two specific examples. The first one is the Frankenjob Spec. We've all seen this. I've seen this across different jobs. The developer one where they ask you for 10 years experience in some tech that's only 2 years old. The classic is in marketing where they ask you to do everything. And the funniest thing I heard from one of the candidates said in the job spec, they want everything but the kitchen sink. Why Why don't you stick a brush at my butt and I'll sweep the floor while I'm at it? And that's how people are passionate about this. It's like, come on, be realistic. They don't know, right? And it just says that they don't understand the job. A little bit more insidious because there's two different types of this as well. It could be a real company and real people, but the job doesn't quite exist. Sometimes it's because they've got to advertise externally, it's part of their process, but they've already chosen someone internally, completely performative. That's bullshit. People hate it. Worse is fake company, fake job. And I think this is more on the candidate side. You've got to find out yourself. You can't just see a job advert, do no research, apply for it, and then complain if it's a crap experience, right? Because anybody can post a job on LinkedIn. But who is the company? Who's connected to them? If you can't find a path from you to them, even a second degree path, I would consider it twice. Fracking and cracking, this is all about expectations. Anthony Sutton, who runs Fresher and Cream HR, he gave me a quote for the Four Horses about this, where one of the biggest problems he sees, and this can cause big problems, right, is the mismatch of expectations between the job and the company and the candidate. And this is someone's overselling something. And again, this comes down to truth and honesty. I've experienced this myself when I was hired at a big company because of what I'd done in the past. And they said, yeah, we want you to do more of the same, but over here. And I'm like, cool, that sounds great. And then when I got in there, they wanted me to do something totally different. And when I said, listen, that's not my bag, it was a problem. So I left, and so did the boss, because people don't like executives who make bad hires. And a bad hire, by the way, it's not you that's necessarily bad. It's a bad fit. So if it's product market, bad fit. So the hiring manager will be getting punished as well as you, right? That's the terrible side of getting this wrong. I mean, one of the classics is, I wrote about this in the Four Horses, about a hiring company, them attracting someone. Why would that person want to work for you? And retaining, why would that person want to keep working for you? And the answer to that is, it's got to further that person, the candidate's career. If it doesn't, you hire a good person and you give them shit work to do, they ain't gonna stay, right? So that's the whole kind of thing. The other experience candidates talk about is the feeling that they're being put through a sausage machine, much like if you get ill in the UK and you try and see a GP, that is a struggle. If you get into the process, you go for multiple appointments, you don't get treated, and it just takes forever and it's awful. And that seems to be the similar thing with some jobs where you go from interview to interview to interview and nothing's really happening. Now, you can understand this a little bit if there's a process. Everybody needs a process, right? And especially when you're hiring, you need a consistent process all across all candidates, right? Um, but sometimes you need to break that rule a little bit, right? Sometimes out of the 100 applications, you get down to 10, and there's two or three that just really stand out. It can sometimes just be one person. Are you still going to apply that standard process, or are you going to customize it a bit and go really deep on the people that seem to be the best? You've got to be flexible in this, right? And I think, good candidates I've spoken to, they feel like it's almost like an inhuman process. And one of the reasons that they say is because they feel the hiring manager or HR, they don't know how to hire a job, right? Imagine being in HR across a company with 500 headcount and lots of different roles. How on earth can you be an expert in any of those? Never mind all of those. And again, it comes back to the expert on the hiring side being kept to last. So again, it's, if you're getting dragged through, I understand it. One of the things you can do is just speak up and ask and say, if you've been asked, if you're a developer and they say, well, we need you to do a leak code or whatever the coding exercise is, and say, well, you know, you got in touch with me because you saw the open source project I've been running for 3 years on GitHub. Do you really want to push? Well, we push all candidates through that. It's up to you if you want to play or not. But, you know, if that puts you off about a company, you're totally fine in making that decision. Quite a few candidates told me how bloody long this takes. If you want a job, typically, you're either employed or you're not employed, right? If you're not employed, you want a job quickly. If you are employed, you might be laissez-faire about it, who cares, blah, 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 blah. But you might also be looking for a pretty quick exit. I think it's fair to say to the company, like, how soon will you make this decision? Just like in a sales opportunity, you'd say, have you got any budget? What's the budget? Is this real or is this not real? And how quickly do you need this? You'll quickly find out when you answer that question. So the expectations we talked about with the Frankenjob Spec, one of the things we really need to focus on here is using back channels to get information about what is a day in the life like in that company. If you know someone in the company, of course you should speak to them. If you know someone who knows someone in the company, speak to them. Try and get some intelligence to work this out, because mismatches are not just about skills, they're also about attitude and in the market and direction and speed and all the, I guess, soft things that you might think about. Now, one of the interesting things that we saw was candidates going through job specs and the job spec changing through the process. Now, this is a little bit like the Frankenjob Spec, but what they found was basically they're using the job process as market research to find out what they want. So the job spec would get smaller over time. And so you'd find you applied and, one of your skills that was in the reason you applied has now been taken out because they want something different. So you've got to be careful of that as well. Checking, is the job still the same as when we started? Sounds like a strange question, but quite a few people said that had happened to them. So that's an interesting one. There was a great thread on LinkedIn. I think it was a recruiter said, stop asking about the package at the start. You can imagine the response on LinkedIn to that, right? There is nothing wrong with asking the package at the start. What's the budget? What is the job level? If it's a big company, they are very strict tiering and where you fit. Good hiring managers and recruiters will tell you what the range is and where you fit. And they'll also tell you what's above you and below you, so you can orientate yourself. If someone doesn't want to say that to you at all, I would think about running a mile. Application tracking systems came up quite a lot. There's this whole AI is great, AI is a pain, candidates are overusing it, hiring managers are overusing it. James Foster on our live stream the other week, he pointed out that ATS is about finding people who've got experience and skills that were impactful and relevant to the job. It's not just about cutting you out because you didn't have some keywords in there. Because there's nothing wrong with using AI to co pilot your CV into a better situation. End of the day, you still own the CV, you're still responsible for it. And one of the other things is a lot of like LinkedIn does this. It says, "Hey, there's like 3,000 applicants for this job," and some people say, "Oh my God, I'm not gonna respond to that." Now, there's 2 points to this. James said the hiring company will have a limit. Now, this depends how they do it, right? But they might say after 100, we're just going to ignore them. So you might be right. I'm not going to apply. Or they might just take all of them and find a way using ATS to come up with the top 100 they're going to care about, or whatever the number is. One of the good bits of experience I've heard from candidates is when they actually reached out and found a recruiter or manager and saying like, "Hey, I've only just seen this, probably too late, um, but I think I'm a pretty good fit. Am I too late? Am I not too late?" And get yourself shoved into the queue if you can. Picking up the phone is something that I've heard a lot from hiring managers, recruiters, and candidates that works. So if you're introverted and don't like talking to people, yeah, that might be a struggle because you're going to be stuck with all the messaging people. But yeah, think twice about that. And the guys at Senya who get a lot of responses, that they're trying to ask people to do a sub 3 minute introduction video. Show your personality. Tell us something about you. Tell us something also relevant to the role, right? Because at the end of the day, especially with smaller companies, you need to get on with people. So they want an attitude check right at the front. So the other thing about companies is, how do you know if they're any good? So you might know through gossip. You might phone someone like me up and I might tell you what I know and who you can speak to find out more. Totally fine doing that. But unfortunately, there's no real industry benchmark or reputation scoring for any of this. And that's something I want to talk about in part 3. In terms of talking to them, it's hard to feedback, especially if you've been ghosted, right? But phoning people up and talking to them is always worth it. I mean, don't be a pain in the ass, right? But give them a ring, say, hey, even just leave them a message, say, hey, this is my short 60-second or less point. Because it's easy, it's a baton race hiring. On the hiring side, they could have a hiring manager or a recruiter. They could have 3 or 5 interview people. It's easy for problems to happen if someone doesn't take notes. So there's nothing wrong with being positive and reaching out to folks. Candidates always judge. Candidates are not the only ones being judged, right? Candidates are also judging companies and hiring managers. And if you've ever been through the management path, it's not always true that you get trained to be a manager and trained to do interviews. And sometimes that training can be crap anyway, right? So the candidates that talked to me about this, they said usually the best ones are experienced ones who take time out to do the recruitment. So for some hiring folks, recruitment is a pain, because they're busy selling, building, whatever they're doing, marketing, delivering services, running operations, whatever that is, that's their main job. But they're asked, oh, can you take part in this hiring thing? Almost like it's a favour. And there's no training, it's inconsistent approach. I mean, I was told some pretty bad stories from people hiring managers who push calls out and then they turn up when they're on a train and then it's like, I can't even speak to them. Or last minute replacements and the manager that comes in is just rough, critical of the company, just wants to put you off to cut the meeting short, and it's one of the rudest things ever. And that kind of story gets out quite a lot. So untrained hiring managers you've got to be aware of. And I would say you should always try and help hiring managers to do their job. That sounds a bit weird, but it's kind of what I'm like. Inconsistency. Wow. I think if you take back all of the feedback that we've had, and you say, what does good look like? I think these are the kind of top 8 things I've heard. So don't ghost me, gaslight me. Don't put jobs up that don't exist. Don't put stupid job specs up that make no sense. That's the first 4. Then the next bit is, in terms of the process, I know you need a process, but be human about it. Let's keep the process short. Let's match expectations and be honest with each other. And right at the start, tell me, is this ballpark package range sensible or not? I think those 8 things should be an industry best practice, but they're not. Another kind of soft part of the feedback was candidates saying that, hey, I'm more than my CV, Steve. And when you talk to people, as I do regularly, you learn a lot about them, what makes them tick, what they don't care about. And this kind of attitude check, I guess you can put it on your CV if you write down, my attitude is this to achieve this. And goes back to James's point about, things you've achieved that are impactful and relevant. But let's be honest, to get your attitude across, you really need to speak to somebody. And I think if I was a candidate today on call, I would make sure I'm consistent. I tell everyone about my attitude, whether it's recruiter, hiring manager, or the expert I'm going to work with. So I wouldn't treat a recruitment in one way, a recruiter in one way, a hiring manager in a different way, and then a potential future teammate in a different way. You've got to put your attitude front and center and be straight up about it. So, all that told, the simple fact is we can all complain about our experiences, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for it, right? We're responsible. We can't control all the things that happen out there, but we can control how we respond to it, right? So you can choose just to be floating around on the sea, getting battered all over the place, or you can choose to take control of it. And these are the 3 things I would recommend everyone does. And if you're doing this already, well done. First of all, get building your network now of allies. And this is not just people that you know. So don't just talk to the same old mates, especially the same old mates in the same old companies. If you think, 2025, I might want to work somewhere a little bit different, start making connections out there. Start getting involved. Talk to them about what it's like, what they do. See if there's opportunities for you to chip in some way. Find out what's good, what's bad. You'd be amazed what people are willing to share with you. You just need to speak with them. And email is not enough. You need to talk to these people, right? Sharing your experience, this is interesting, right? So I asked all the candidates who responded, do you want to be quoted? And most people said no, and I understand that. And so all of this is in confidence. And one of the reasons is they feel like they don't want to look like a moaner. They don't want hiring people to see them objecting or complaining about something. But you'd be amazed if you share your experience online, the amount of support you'll get from people. And you will get managers reaching out saying, it's not always like that, And then if you follow that up with some positive feedback, you'd be amazed, if you're balanced with that. But again, that's almost part of creating a network. You need to be doing that before you need the network. That's the important thing. Now, what I want to do is a little bit different. So, and it's what I'm calling part 3 of this. So part 1 was the hiring apocalypse. Part 2 was the candid candidate. And part 3 is putting a solution together to maybe go some way to solving this. Now, all I'm going to share so far is just some loose requirements, and I'm doing that on purpose. But I have to say, I've already done a couple of MVPs on this, so I think this has got legs, but it needs a quorum and some momentum. So I'm going to leave this here. I won't read out all these requirements, but imagine if we had a better system of not just applying for a job, That's one part of this whole thing, right? Imagine there was a better way of managing your career. Imagine there was a better way of joining, moving, and leaving a company. Imagine if there was a better way of understanding the market through some kind of scoring mechanism of individuals and companies. Now, that's very sensitive, and people will push back on that. But a little bit like your credit score, imagine if companies and jobs and things like that had some kind of score. Well, maybe that's the next step. Maybe it's too ambitious. I don't know. But that was me, Steve Chambers, and thanks to all of the people that took time over the last few weeks to share their candid candidate experiences. It took me ages to collate them all into some kind of group. I didn't do a survey because when I did a survey last time, I realised I'd done a survey too soon, because you need to kind of find out what the questions are before you do the survey, right? And I don't presume to know everyone's experience, and I've definitely learned from this. So I thank you all, and thanks for watching this. Thanks for contributing, and get in touch through all the socials online, and I'd love to see you in part 3.